Hello and welcome to 3 Must-Have Components for Successful Ransomware Recovery. Today's webinar is sponsored by Rubrik and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. The Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, and slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources, and I'd especially like to call your attention to a link to learn more about Rubrik and Rubrik's solutions around ransomware. Also in there, you'll find a link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club, where you can get access to Actual Tech Media's great printed resources on technology topics, as well as a link to the ATM Events Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events. So I encourage you to access those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $300 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section as well. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. So to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card. This one's for $50, and that's for the best question. At the end of the event, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. And with that, let's get to today's fantastic content. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today. We have Robert Hamilton, Senior Director of Product Marketing, Kim Lambert, Principal Product Marketing Manager, Christina Avrionova, Principal Product Marketing Manager, and Kev Johnson, a Technical Marketing Architect, all from Rubrik. So let's turn things over to Robert to get us started.
Welcome to our webinar today. I'm Robert Hamilton from the Rubrik Marketing Organization, and joining me today are my colleagues Kim, Christina, and Kev. The 3 Ks. Hey, before we get started, I want to tell you a quick story. It was 4 a.m. in the morning, May of 2021. Matthew Day, CIO of Lang's Building Supplies, was excited about a long anticipated holiday after 14 months of lockdown due to COVID. His wife was thrilled. All of his friends he was going to go visit, ecstatic, hadn't seen him in a long time. But the day took an unexpected turn. Instead of waking up delighted to leave for his getaway, Matthew awakened to every CIO's worst nightmare, the dreaded phone call. We've been hacked. So We've Been Hacked is our theme today. I'm going to talk about some new research we've just completed regarding cyber attacks and the human toll that they take. Then Kim is going to discuss a new approach to security that helps solve ransomware attacks in particular. And then Christina is going to introduce a new product from Rubrik. And then Kev will show you a demo of how Rubrik can help you boost your data security and recover from a cyber attack. But first, let's take a look at a couple of other attacks our customers have reported to us. I'm going to play a short video interview with Payette. Payette's an award-winning architecture firm on the East Coast of the US, whose mission is to create buildings of purpose. Payette's architects have shaped cutting-edge, 5.5 million square foot science centers to world-changing hospitals around the world. Let's listen to Dan Gallivan, Director of IT at Payette.
The attack occurred on a Saturday morning. What we thought was a routine power disruption, we quickly realized this was different. It's not just dollars per hour of missed billings. We really look at it as we could see construction deadlines missed, we could lose client reputation or faith in our services.
And finally, I want to share Southern Louisiana Community College's story, a system that serves over 10,000 students. Nick Petrie, director of IT at South Louisiana Community College, he had a funny feeling something was brewing. The Rubrik ransomware variant had been making its round at colleges, and so he knew it would not be long before SLCC was probably also targeted. Well, sadly, he was right. He noticed odd behavior when his team was not able to log in one day. Servers were being encrypted, he recalled. The infiltration occurred by way of an administrator loading some new software onto basically a forgotten Windows 7 desktop that had been collecting dust in a closet for some time. So Matthew at Langs, Dan at Payette, and Nick at Southern Louisiana Community College have all been through a ransomware attack. And it's likely many of you listening in today have also been through one or more attacks. Our customers have told us that it's one of the worst experiences they've gone through professionally. And Christina's going to tell you how each of these stories, Payette, Southern Louisiana Community College, and Langs, turned out towards the end of the webinar today. You know, understanding the human experience was one of the reasons we at Rubrik started a new organization, Rubrik Zero Labs. Zero Labs was founded to analyze the global threat landscape, report on emerging data security issues, and then give organizations research-backed insights and best practices to secure their data against these pervasive cyber threats. Now, Chris Krebs, the former director of CISA and the chairman of Rubrik's CISO Advisory Board, has said that we often overlook the psychological dimension of cyber attacks and the chaos that tends to follow after discovering an incident. So with that in mind, with Chris's idea in mind, Rubrik Zero Labs' first report is the state of data security. And that report digs into this idea about psychological impact even further. Now, to create a report, we gathered responses from over 1,600 IT and security decision makers at companies of 500 or more employees. Respondents were made up of approximately half CIOs and CISOs and half VPs and directors of IT and security. And the research was conducted in the US, UK, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Australia, Singapore, and India in July of 2022. Now, we've made available the full report as part of this webinar, or you can find it on Rubrik.com. But here are some of the highlights. First, cyber attacks are absolutely on the mind of senior leadership. 98% of organizations reported at least one attack getting visibility by senior leadership, and the cyber attack issue has made its way to boards of directors. Ransomware attacks are so mainstream now that the United States commercial broadcast network CBS did a segment on their news show, popular show, 60 Minutes, just this year, all about ransomware. Anyway, back to the report. Nearly every leader surveyed experienced a cyber attack over the past year, and half reported a data breach, and another half reported facing a ransomware attack over the past year. Let's talk about what we found is on senior leadership's mind. First, a statistic not on the slide. Over 90% of respondents are concerned that they will be unable to maintain business continuity if they experience a cyber attack. And this is what's concerning senior management and boards of directors. Okay, 1/3 of respondents believe that their board has little to no confidence in their organization's ability to recover critical data and business applications after an attack. 3/4 of respondents reported that their organization is likely to consider paying a ransom, and half are very likely to pay the ransom. Now, here's what Chris Krebs was talking about. The weight of cybercrime is taking a toll. 96% of the respondents reported experiencing significant emotional or psychological consequences following an attack, ranging from worries over job security to loss of trust among colleagues. And about 1/3 of respondents reported leadership changes as a result of cyber attacks. So huge impact on the organization. And 1/3 of the leaders we surveyed said their IT and SecOps teams were either somewhat or not at all aligned when it came to defending their organizations. So bottom line, a lot of orgs feel they're just not ready. And the problem isn't going away, and cyber attacks are creating more uncertainty than ever. Okay, I'll switch gears now and turn it over to Kim, who's going to help you understand why traditional security measures are insufficient to deal with ransomware and cyber attacks. And then Kim will explain how you can take a new look and a different approach to data security.
All right, thanks, Robert. Good to speak to you all today. All right, so first off, I'd like to walk you through what typically happens during an attack, so you can see how it usually ends up playing out. All right, here it goes. See, attackers are penetrating perimeter defenses and they're locking down the data. And when that happens, you have two fundamental options. Option one, pay the ransom. Now, even if ransom demands are met, there's no guarantee that the attacker is going to provide the decryption key to unlock your data. And even if they do, that they'll provide it quick enough to get you back up and running as fast as your business requires. And if that doesn't happen, you end up paying the ransom. Now, option two, you can attempt to recover. And to do this, your IT and security teams will first try to turn to their backup data. But if that data is compromised by ransomware, you still may end up needing to pay the ransom. And even if you do have access to your backup, who's to say you can actually find the data anomalies to assess what applications are impacted? Could you find the last known clean copy of your data to recover? If you fail on both those fronts, guess what? Again, you may have to pay the ransom. So let's talk about that modern approach to data security rather than just having a backup solution and checking the box, how that can really help you answer these questions to recover your data safely and quickly. So you saw from Robert how despite investments in infrastructure security tools, cyber criminals are still getting through and they're taking down entire businesses. So these attacks are really shining a light on why it's so important to integrate data security into your data management platform and IT operations. It's important to take a zero trust approach to security, meaning trust no one and assume compromise, and to combine data security with infrastructure security to help fully secure your data and your business. Okay, so to do that, there's three necessary components, and Rubrik fulfills those requirements via SaaS-based Rubrik Security Cloud. And it's got three security pillars here, offering data resilience, data risk monitoring, and observability, even integrating with popular SIEM and SOAR tools, including Microsoft Sentinel, to drive that collaboration between IT ops and SecOps. And then, of course, remediation and recovery of your data wherever it lives across enterprise, cloud, SaaS, plus the ability to avoid malware reinfection. And that's something that can be a real risk when all you have to restore from is a compromised backup. Okay, so when you think about being resilient, the first pillar, it's particularly relevant right now because, frankly, there's never been a more important time to focus on data resilience. We hear it from law enforcement, the FBI, CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and we even hear it from cyber insurance companies. But the thing is, legacy data protection solutions just weren't built to stand up to today's threats. So when you're assessing your cyber resilience, you really need to ask yourself questions like, can my global admin credentials be compromised? If everything becomes compromised, what is our fail-safe plan? Can my backups be discovered and seen by attackers if they were to get in? Okay, and then yes, I have data retention rules in place, but could they be modified or deleted by a threat actor, meaning that there'd be no data left to actually recover? So you really need to be able to protect your data. You need air-gapped, immutable access control protection, and we can provide that with Rubrik. Now, when we say air gap, a logical air gap is what's going to prevent data access and discovery. Encryption everywhere, that's something that's going to protect data at rest and in flight without impacting performance. Access control at every level, so that provides role-based access control and credentials protected by multi-factor authentication and time-based one-time passwords. Intelligent data lock, that prevents malicious mass deletion or even inadvertent deletion that can happen with human error. And this data security it's immutable by design. So it prevents unauthorized changes by storing data in a proprietary format and verifying integrity with continuous data checks. And finally, a zero trust retention lock. And that's going to prevent anyone from tampering with retention SLAs. And it utilizes the two-person rule for increased security. So all of this combined, it means that bad actors can't find the data because it's air-gapped. They can't change it because it's immutable. They can't see it because it's encrypted, and they can't access it because it's protected by MFA. And they can't mess with the rules because of retention lock. And even if they could, Rubrik would still save the day with intelligent data lock, which is going to keep all your data as a fail-safe for at least 7 days beyond the last admin action. But what's important to remember too is that securing the data isn't quite enough. You also need to be able to address data risks. And that means being able to answer some different questions, like when was the first entry of malware into our backup data? When did that occur exactly? Because I want to be able to restore my data to the absolute latest point in time before it was compromised, so I can minimize that data loss. Have there been any unusual deletions or modifications that are outside the norm? What's going on in our internal system data that could be an indicator of compromise? And then perhaps most importantly, what sensitive data, things like personally identifiable information, may have been affected if we're attacked? What's the potential exfiltration risk there? And for that, you've got data observability, our second pillar. So data observability sets out to search for ransomware, identify classified data exposure, and potential compromise. And so with ransomware monitoring investigation, we're using automation to detect data anomalies and encryptions, and even determine the type of infection and the scope of the attack. And as you know, as your volume of sensitive data just grows and grows, unwanted modification and exfiltration can expose you to greater risk of compliance failure, brand damage, especially when your actual visibility into where this data lives and who has access to it is limited. So our approach to sensitive data monitoring and management is to use over 60 built-in analyzers. We scan your data to help you better prepare for an attack, and then at the same time meet regulatory compliance standards. And we talked about how it's definitely possible to reinfect production environments with the vulnerabilities that triggered an attack in the first place. And this happens often with legacy solutions. So when malware infection happens, it can then end up extending the time to remediate. And then it increases the risks, it increases the costs involved. So that's why Rubrik speeds up your incident response process by searching backups for known indicators of compromise with threat hunting. And these data observability tools, they integrate with automated recovery workflows. And that's important because at the end of the day, it's really all about whether or not you can actually restore your data quickly and get yourself back to that pre-attack state. And during any attack, the most common recovery questions there are things like, how do I streamline restores of those mission critical apps to minimize business interruption? How can I pinpoint the data that needs to be recovered? How can I limit my restores to just the data I need? And then, of course, how can I recover from a clean copy of my data? Now, our third and final pillar, data remediation, it does just that. So data remediation includes threat containment, where we're actually able to quarantine infected data. And that's effectively isolating the entire snapshot or individual files. You can then download that quarantine data to understand the root cause, the point of origin, and other details, and even control access to that data to prevent accidental reinfection. And in parallel with your forensic investigations, you can restore your applications, your files, your users quickly using predefined automated workflows for mass recovery. All right, so to really show you Rubrik's value here, I'm really excited to hand things over to Christina to introduce one of our newest features we announced in our winter release, which as a whole, I encourage you to explore on our website to get a real sense of the latest security innovations that we have for you for cyber preparedness. All right, over to you, Christina.
Thank you, Kim. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining our session. My name is Kristina Avrionova, and I am also on the product marketing team here at Rubrik. So yes, let's take some time and talk about our latest offering, Rubrik for cyber recovery. Now, when you are hit with a ransomware attack, there are really two things you want to do. You want to be able to go back to business very quickly. You want to be able to restore and keep the business running. And of course, at the same time, you want to understand what has happened, when did it happen. You want to conduct your forensics. So with Rubrik Cyber Recovery, this is what we allow you to do. We allow you to restore your business operation using the last known clean state. You can take the output of Rubrik of ransomware investigation and understand when was the last clean copy so you can begin recovery. And at the same time, we allow you to move the data in an isolated environment so you can begin conducting out-of-band investigation, that you can start understanding when did the malware get in, when did the attack happen, and so on. Now, remember that statistic we shared with you a little while ago, that about 33% of executives and the chairmen of the boards believe that their organizations are not ready to recover from a cyber attack. Well, the other beautiful thing that Rubrik Cyber Recovery gives you is the ability to assess your cyber readiness. Again, by mounting the backup data in a separate environment, you can test, validate, and begin documenting the success of your recovery plans. You can create reports and you can share them with the executives so they know exactly how the situation will unfold. So in a nutshell, with Rubrik Cyber Recovery, you can recover faster and with confidence. You can test how your recovery plans will work with real live backup data. You can, again, mount this data in an isolated environment and you can perform your security assessments there easily. But really, the greatest thing about it is that you can, when you are hit with a cyber attack, you can begin restoring knowing your last clean copy. And at the same time, you can have in parallel those forensics investigations. But now I would like to pass it to my colleague, Kev Johnson, because he will share a great demo of Rubrik Cyber Recovery.
Let's take a look at what this looks like. This doesn't require any pre-building of any recovery plans. We can select any protected object for an ad hoc recovery, and if we need to, we can save this off as a recovery plan for those plans that you might need to repeat regularly. Once we've selected the objects to recover into our isolated recovery environment, or IRE, we get a brief description of what we're about to do, including a reminder to include any fundamental infrastructure services. Remember, this is all isolated, so there's no reaching out to production for DNS, authentication, or anything like that. We then select whether we're going to set up an IRE or if we want to do an in-place recovery. In-place recovery is what you'd use to bring all of the selected objects back into production as quickly as possible. With the relevant objects selected, we have a few options in terms of the point in time that we're recovering. By default, if there are any recommendations from ransomware investigation or threat hunting, we'll present the clean snaps by default. In this case, we're particularly interested in the snapshots that have been quarantined based on the results of a threat hunt. It's worth mentioning that once quarantined, these are unavailable for a regular administrator to restore. This helps to protect against accidentally reinfecting your production environment, but at the same time allows for a SecOps operator to recover for forensics in an isolated environment like this. We can obviously select any snapshots that we like, but being able to zero in on what you need without needing to go searching can really help you to save time if you're in firefighting mode. With the objects and the snapshots selected, we now need to select where we're going to instantiate the isolated recovery environment. First, I'll select the relevant vCenter server, data center, and vSphere cluster to use to provide the compute for the isolated environment, making sure that the isolated networks are presented to the hosts in the cluster. As we're using isolated networks, we have no need to change IP addresses and the like. We do have options to do this if we're overlapping with other sandboxes on the same isolated networks, for example. We don't need to specify storage, as all VMs are running off Rubrik using the live mount capability. Our next port of call is to specify a recovery order. This enables us to ensure that the supporting infrastructure is ready before we start bringing up the application, database, web, etc. As you can see, we can also apply pauses between the different priority groups if this is required. Here, we're going to split our servers into the 3 groups. We have the option to execute post-recovery scripts as a part of this workflow too. This might be to trigger things like a malware scan, configure local logging. Remember, this is isolated, so you might not be able to get your application logs to your usual logging tool, or anything else. As you can see, these scripts can be PowerShell or Bash based. If the required script already exists on the server at the point that the snapshot was taken, we can specify its path here. Alternatively, we can either upload a file for Rubrik to push to the server, or we can simply paste in the script here. So we can see here the script that is going to get pushed to this server. The final thing that we need to do is to give this recovery a name. We also have the option, as I mentioned earlier, to save the details of the relevant machines, networks and the like as a recovery plan, so we can easily run through this process again in future with the same contents. Once we give our recovery plan a name, we hit confirm to start our recovery into an isolated recovery environment. We can monitor the recovery progress through to completion and drill into each recovery for more details. Once the recovery is completed, we can connect in any other tooling required. These might be vulnerability scanners, malware reverse engineering kit, memory dumps, and literally anything that's needed to serve the purpose of the isolated recovery environment. Obviously, we're talking about a very specific use case here, but there's nothing to say that you couldn't use this to test patches, upgrades, etc., or anything else. The final area I'd like to highlight is the reporting capability. So when we were building out this solution, one of the challenges that customers mentioned regularly was having that capability to prove that you're testing your recoverability. With this in mind, it's super simple to export reports showing all that you need to satisfy your CISO or your cyber insurance provider.
Okay, thank you, Kev. So yes, recovery is very important because can you afford to wait? Can your business afford to wait weeks, months? Because we know that usually this is what organizations are faced with when they try to recover from cyber attacks. And now let me tell you the story, continue the story, or tell you how the story ended for Lang's Building Supplies. Guess what? It took them 25 minutes to restore their virtual machines. There was zero data loss. And it took them 24 hours to fully recover. The attack happened over a weekend. So on Monday, they were back in business. And as Matt today, their CIO, will tell you, Rubrik is not just about recovery from ransomware. It is the difference between survival and non-survival in this new digital age. And now let's play the little video of Payette so we can hear how their story ended.
Cyber attacks are paralyzing events. If we had to restore from our traditional backup systems before Rubrik, it would have taken weeks to months to get everything up and running. Rubrik saved us from paying a ransom. It never occurred to our team to pay a ransom, due to our confidence in Rubrik's ransomware recovery capabilities and immutable backups.
And lastly, the South Louisiana Community College. Remember, their servers were being encrypted. So with Rubrik, they paid $0 in ransom. And there was zero data loss. And they were back in business for 2 hours. It took them 2 hours to fully recover. So yes, the students had to go back to class and they had to continue taking their exams. But as their director of IT, Nick Pietre, will tell you, without Rubrik, recovery could have taken weeks, which is exactly what happened to another college in Louisiana. They were completely out of luck and spent weeks recovering. Our situation was 100% contained in 2 hours. Yes, Rubrik makes that possible. And we have over 4,500 customers across so many industry. And yes, everybody's 100% protected. I invite you to go to Rubrik.com and you can read more customers' success stories. You can watch more customer testimonial videos, and you can familiarize yourself in depth with Rubrik Security Cloud. And on that note, actually, we would like to thank you for attending our session today, and we will open the floor for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Robert, Kim, Christina, and Kev. Great presentation. As Christina just mentioned, let's get into some questions. So, Kim, for our first question, they're asking, what do you mean by data security?
Yeah, so you invest a lot of money in everything from endpoint network to database security, but your investments in security don't guarantee that you're not going to be attacked. Security is really about risk mitigation. It's not risk avoidance. And any organization is going to invest, they're going to spend their security dollars differently. But when it comes to data security, while maybe you've invested in prevention, you've invested in detection tools and in investigating cyber attacks, this data security is talking about, well, have you invested in making sure your data is backed up, that it's safe from attack? Can you look at your backup data to see if you've been infected or attacked? And can you recover that data quickly? So that's what data security is all about, as opposed to infrastructure security.
Okay, great differentiation there between data security and infrastructure security, really helpful. That's a good lead into our next question. What is the biggest mistake organizations make when it comes to data security?
The biggest mistake is that people don't know if they can recover. They don't know how secure their backup data really is. And within the product, we put a facility in there that continuously monitors the security of the Rubrik system itself. And this actually gives you a score. It's called Data Security Command Center. It gives you a score for how you're doing and actionable recommendations on how to improve that score across 5 discrete areas. So it covers everything from two-factor authentication to, hey, are all of your SQL environments being backed up? It's going to tell you where you're at. It's assessing whether you're actually prepared to restore that data.
I like that. Scores can be really helpful. When they're based on realistic metrics, they give you a good tool for assessment and for improvement. Okay, here's someone wondering about specific platforms. Can Rubrik assist in recovery of DB2 or SAP HANA?
Yes, we support all the major databases and also many of the minor ones as well.
And here's one getting to the heart of Rubrik's technology. How does Rubrik provide immutability?
Sure. So when you talk about immutability, first, the definition of that is where the state is set. It's inflexible once it's constructed. Nothing can be changed. That's what we mean by immutable. When the founders first built Rubrik, they created a purpose-built file system that was created for this one thing versus using a general file system. It's just for a file server so they can optimize to do one thing and do it well, and that's backup. So data managed by Rubrik is never available in a read or write state to any client, and this is true even during a restore situation. So since data can't be overwritten, or even infected data that's ingested by the Rubrik system cannot infect other existing files or folders. So the data in that way, it's immutable.
Got it. What's next in ransomware recovery?
Yeah, so what's next? Okay, so we talked about in this presentation our latest feature, which is being able to simulate and practice a ransomware recovery. And for that, remember what we're doing is Rubrik has a feature called Live Mount, where we're accessing data as if it were live while it stays on the Rubrik system. So customers use Live Mount to bring up a copy of, say, a SQL Server database from a week or a few weeks ago, to run tests on it, to do some patches. And what we're doing with this new feature, Cyber Recovery, is you create a sandbox environment, you bring your networking and your compute, and you can live mount your storage into that environment off of Rubrik and simulate a recovery, or even do a real recovery where you isolate the data you want to recover, you run tests on it, you make sure it's okay, and you actually perform a recovery there.
Good stuff coming up with Live Mount, it sounds like. Okay, next question here. Does Rubrik protect on-premises data and data in the cloud?
Yes, so Rubrik protects enterprise data in the data center, data in the cloud, both hybrid cloud and cloud native workloads, plus Microsoft 365, so protecting your SaaS applications as well. We have a huge business in protecting Microsoft 365 environments as well. So yes, all of the above.
Great. Thanks for expanding that to Microsoft 365. That's such an important platform for so many of our audience members. They're wondering next, how long has Rubrik been in business?
Well, yeah, we will be 9 years old very shortly. We've been shipping product since 2015. So that's how long we've been around for quite some time.
9 years. Okay, great. Another business question. How many customers does Rubrik have?
We have 4,500 customers across a lot of different industries. So a mix of businesses across healthcare, financial services, tech, education, media, everything. So we've been shipping products since 2015. So yeah, I guess we are over 9 years old now. And we've even announced in August 2022 that we surpassed $400 million in subscription revenue on an annual basis. That was something that we put out in a press release. So I'd say even in Silicon Valley standards, that's phenomenal in terms of growth rate. And we're going to continue to grow in triple digits year after year because that's what we've been showing.
Impressive. Thanks for that business context. Okay, what's the best way to learn more about Rubrik?
Yeah, if you want to learn about Rubrik in more depth, we run a series of field events called Camp Rubrik, and you likely have one coming to your individual areas soon geographically. And this is your chance to go in person and play with the Rubrik product, to listen to some of our sales engineers give shop talks. And for this, you're not necessarily interacting with sales, you're not interacting with account executives, but this is something where you're talking with our technical experts, people who are intimately familiar with the Rubrik system. You get to try it out, talk with them, and learn more.
Camp Rubrik, that's a fun name. Okay, so we had a question earlier about Rubrik protecting data on premises and in the cloud. Here's one asking about where Rubrik's code lives. Does Rubrik run on premises and in the cloud?
Yes, both. So to explain the way Rubrik works, traditional backup systems to a large extent were all invented back in the late 90s, the early 2000s. Storage servers, catalog servers, all of this becomes a bit of a nightmare when you've got a lot of different specialized servers. So with Rubrik, our software runs on a Rubrik device, or you can run it on a third-party HP server, Cisco UCS server, Dell server, and then you access that device through a web interface over a SaaS platform. And there's an on-premises device access via our SaaS platform. So the SaaS platform runs in Google Cloud, but you wouldn't necessarily know that. And then you start taking backups on-prem or in the cloud. And your backups are stored on that device, whether it's a Rubrik device or a third-party device. And then over time, if you want, you can age off your backups when they reach a certain point, a certain age, and then say store your monthly backups over 2 to 3 months old on AWS, on Azure, on GCP. So you only have as much on-premises storage as you need. And we also back up data in the cloud to the cloud. So if you want to archive your data, you can archive to Azure, to GCP, to AWS, or even to something called Rubrik Cloud Vault, which is in Azure, but physically and logically isolated from your Azure account for an extra layer of security.
Okay, Cam, and I think we've got time for one more question. Does Rubrik also have privacy features within the product?
Yeah, so when it comes to privacy, I always recommend checking out our privacy policy. You can find that on Rubrik.com. You can find the most in-depth information there. But know that Rubrik definitely does take the appropriate precautions within the product to safeguard your data against theft, misuse, unauthorized access, and even destruction. So I'll say that Rubrik goes so far as to have security features that require a two-person rule. So this is interesting because, say in the unlikely event a malicious insider or an external threat actor were to get access and to delete a large data set of your backed up data, backed up by Rubrik, know that it's not going to be actually deleted until you get a call from Rubrik support. Those are the folks that are monitoring your system, and they're going to ask, "Hey, wait, did you really want to delete all this data?" So in that way, you have that extra precaution. You're very, very much protected against data loss and the risk that comes with data exfiltration and exposure of your sensitive data.
All right. Well, thanks again to Robert and Kim, Christine, and Kev for putting together a really informative presentation, and thanks, Kim, for all your insights there in the Q&A. Really appreciate everybody's time today. And before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business. It's the Amazon gift card prize drawing, and the winner of that $300 Amazon gift card today is Duke Vulong from Colorado. So congratulations to Duke. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Rubrik for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day.